Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Kindness Habit. After you listen to this episode, you're going to know the science behind why it's really important to be kind to others, and also how it's going to boost your happiness. My guest today is someone that I've known for over a decade. We work together on a board in the National Speakers Association. He is a fellow professional speaker, and he has studied the science behind happiness. So we are in a mastermind together. We see each other monthly. I have a lot of respect for our next guest, for what he has done and the difference he makes for companies, for the impact of happiness. So please help me welcome from Sisters, Oregon, Scott Crabtree.
Thank you so much, Allison. So nice to see you again and be with
Nice
you
to
and
see
talk
you.
about kindness.
Woo! So you just moved to Sisters, Oregon, and the listeners who don't know where Sisters, Oregon is, tell them first where it is and why did you move there? Because you lived in Portland before.
So Sisters is a small town in Central Oregon. It's about a half hour from Bend, if anyone happens to know where Bend is.
It's where the last Blockbuster is, right? Last Blockbuster.
Yes, exactly. And I moved to Sisters to be happier. I am not much of an urban person, and I had been in Portland from 1992 to 2021. So a long time, and I loved Portland, but I simply got tired of the city. And it's interesting because the science of happiness says, I don't know why.
I just saw your headshot, but I really like your headshot. Oh, and then you're back.
Don't know why Zoom is doing that lately. I apologize.
Well, it's just, if you want to see his headshot, you can go back and watch the video and then you can see Scott's headshot, which is very nice.
You are very kind, Allison. It's fun to do
true.
this with a kind person who practices what she preaches. So it's funny because the science of happiness says all of our circumstances don't affect our happiness that much. But for me, the move from Portland to Sisters has been filled with happy joy. I am a more relaxed person. I am very nature oriented. I saw one deer already this morning and one quail, as you know, because I was distracted by the quail right before you hit record. I was like, oh, there's a quail on my fence outside. So anytime I see any nature, mountains, wildlife, I am a happy man. So moving to Sisters has been a wonderful, happy move. And I still can do most of my work either virtually or flying out of the wonderful Bend Redmond Airport to almost anywhere. So it has worked wonderfully.
Oh yeah. And I love just hearing about your nature experiences, whether it is seeing animals or if you're hiking, but you also are really passionate about music, and you've also gotten in the Sisters community about music. So let's just talk a couple of things that you're doing that is kind for yourself, besides moving to a different location where you feel more energized, more relaxed is definitely kind. I did the same thing moving to Colorado. Yeah. What are you doing? Because again, we do have to practice what we preach. We have to like energize ourselves. So how does music also, and what are you doing with music that's really energizing you?
Yeah, great question and a great point you're making, Allison. I think when we think of kindness, most people think of being kind to others, and we don't think about being kind to ourselves. And that's where it starts.
Exactly.
Because kindness is contagious. It's hard to be kind to others if you're not kind to yourself. And unfortunately, many of us were raised with messages that led to internal voices that are not very kind to ourselves. Right. We say things to ourselves sometimes that we would never say to another person, that are harsh, right? Yes. Now, I've come a long way in that regard, but I applaud and appreciate your point about being kind to ourselves. So as music is a great example of something I do to be kind to myself. I just love playing music. I play music as much as I can, basically. Just had a 3-day camp out party with friends filled with lots of sitting around with guitars and whatnot, playing music. And I am part of 2 bands here in Sisters, one of which has a name and one of which is brand new and doesn't have a name. But the trio I'm part of, we call ourselves Whychus, which is the name of a creek here, Whychus, Whychus. And we play folk music and rock and roll, and I just love getting together with other people and making music, being in the moment and immersed in something we like to do. It doesn't get much better than that. And research has shown since the pandemic started that getting into flow, getting into that focused zone where everything is clicking for you is an especially good way of dealing with hard times. So for many of us, the hard times continue. So what do? Be kind to others, and getting into flow, getting into that focused zone are a couple of great things we can do to be kind to ourselves.
For sure. Now we were just talking, you left Intel, you worked at Intel over 10 years ago, and you started this company. I first want to know, why were you so passionate about starting a company that you can make other people live a better life, be more productive as teams, really infuse more happiness? What inspired you to do that? And then also, I do want to start getting into some of the research behind why happiness is so important. And I believe we're talking that a lot of kindness leads to happiness. So let's start with 10 years ago, you're at Intel. What made you be so passionate about starting your company?
Well, I almost literally stumbled into the science of happiness. I happened to go into Powell's books in Portland, Oregon, and find a book called The How of Happiness by Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky, a professor who was my introduction to the fact that there's real solid peer-reviewed science of happiness. There are choices we can make, being kind is one of them, that will lead to boosting our happiness. And the amazing thing is that happiness brings so many benefits. Now, some of this evidence is causal, some of it is correlational. We don't have time or probably the nerdy interest to go into all the subtleties, but know that some of this is causal and some of it is correlational. But happier people, they are more energetic, they are better citizens, they are kinder to other people, they're more resilient, they're more engaged, they notice more, they're more intuitive and creative, they're ultimately more successful, they make more money. And as if all of that weren't enough, happier people are healthier people. They show up in the emergency room less often, they show up at work more often, and happier people live longer. So I finished The How of Happiness and I was like, I want all of that. That is a wonderful list of things that I want to be and do and enjoy. And I want it for myself, but I also want it for the world, because I experienced and witnessed a fair amount of unhappiness at Intel and other various places I worked, not unique to Intel being unhappy or running into unhappy colleagues. And also, at the risk of oversharing, I had deep unhappiness in my family of origin. So I had a sister who has since passed away who struggled a lot in life and was not very happy. So when I discovered the science of happiness, I was like, I want this. The world needs this. My family needs this. And at the time, not many people knew about the science of happiness. It has since become quite popular and well known. But at the time, people were like, science of happiness? I was like,
to go together?
Let me tell you about it.
Yes. And okay, so that motivated you. And then, so how do you help companies? Like, what do you do? And then what are you noticing when you're training companies, really to focus on, your happiness techniques? What are you noticing the outcomes are? Because we know right now that anxiety, loneliness, depression, like everything is up in a bad way right now. And so what you and I both do with our clients is so needed right now to give people these tools. But let's tell the listeners, how do you help companies with this? Like, you have some big clients, that hire you. So, and I don't know if you're allowed to talk about your clients, but okay. So what are you noticing the impact for people at work? And then obviously it's going to trickle down to what they're doing in their home environment.
Yeah. So basically, let me just say this first, because it's really important. I am not licensed or qualified to treat any mental health disorder. So I say that just to be extra careful, because I call my company Happy Brain Science. I call myself Chief Happiness Officer, since I'm the founder and can call myself whatever I want.
Right.
And there's strong evidence that this science-based material, these actions, will make a significant difference for people at various starting places of happiness. So it's not that it can't help, but I just want to be crystal clear. While I am a professional helper for happiness, I am not a professional mental health therapist. So that caution said, that qualifier said, I go in and I do workshops, coaching. I have a card game and I'm working on a video game. All of it are designed to teach the science of thriving at work, which is happiness and more. Let's talk about happiness specifically. The session I've done the most in my decade of working with DreamWorks and Boeing and National Park Service and Nike and Intel and people like that. The session I've done the most is called The Science of Being Happy and Productive at Work. It has 4 themes. Normally I take 3 or 4 hours to explain these. Don't worry, I'll try to do this in 1 minute. Theme 1, subdue stress. It's hard to be stressed and happy at the same time. Effective stress management is important. 2, practice positivity. It may be cheesy or cliche, but positive attitude simply works. Bring it. 3, flow to goals is a reference to that focused zone I already mentioned where everything is clicking that scientists call flow and the importance of progress towards clear and meaningful goals. The 4th section is the most important one. And if a client doesn't have enough time to go through all 4 sections, I say, okay, we should cut one of these, but what we should not cut is the last one, revitalize relationships. Because for most of us, most of the time, everyone is different, but for most of us, most of the time, it is the quality of our relationships with other people that make the biggest impact on our happiness and well-being. More than anything else, what I'm hearing from clients lately is we need to reinvigorate our relationships. We need to reinvest in relationships. We need to build trust and teamwork and break down silos. Because what I hear from a lot of people is, yeah, a third of the team has never met each other. They've all been hired since the pandemic started. Or since the pandemic sent everyone home, we don't have any of that fun chit chat time with each other. So things are getting harder with each other. Another big theme I'm hearing about from clients is it's hard to hire and engage and keep good people. There's a war for talent going on.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So all of this comes together and kindness is really at the center of it because it's not the only way of investing in relationships, but it's one of the best ways of investing in relationships. And the solid peer-reviewed data suggests that it's all win-win. Happier people tend to be kinder. Kinder people tend to be happier. It's a virtuous circle. So if we induce you to be happy, which I love these studies I get to read. I've got one up here that I was refreshing myself on before a study. One way that they induce happiness in people is to randomly deliver cookies to people studying in the library and then see how they behave afterwards. So in any case, there are studies where you actually intentionally make someone happier and then those people behave more kindly. And those who behave more kindly become happier. And furthermore, our behavior is contagious. So you are such a wonderful force in the world, Allison, because you practice what you preach. You professionally spread this message of kindness. You also do a lot of kind acts. I have personally been the recipient of multiple acts of kindness from you. And not only does the science say it boosts your mood and mine when you're kind to me, it makes me more likely to be kind to others. So it is so win-win-win, virtuous circle, contagious. It all supports each other.
Oh my gosh, yes. I love that. And I'm hearing the exact same thing from my clients, that it is really hard to keep people and that there's so many barriers. And there is the virtual space is adding, different barriers of connection and communication.
Absolutely.
And when we are kind, like, I love to be kind because I know that you're talking about the recent thing that I sent you. I sent you it said spread happiness, and it was a hummus knife that you could spread in a little recipe. And the funny thing was, I asked for your address, I sent it, but then it wasn't really top of mind, but was it's fun for me because then I got your, you made a nice video on LinkedIn, hey, thank you so much. So it was a win-win. I sent it, I forgot, that was fun, but then I got another reaction. So you want to be kind because you want to do that. But selfishly, I feel really good when I know I made someone, feel appreciated and seen and valued.
this is part of why I love teaching the science of happiness, is so much of it is win-win, right? This is not like, how can you trick your employees into working more hours and ruining their lives? I mean, it's not like that. So much of it is win-win. There's a study that involved Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky, who I mentioned earlier, study done where they randomly assigned people in a corporation to be givers or receivers of kindness, in this case, gifts, and they had a control group as well. And so predictably, and yeah, as we would expect, the control group had no differences.
Mhm.
Those who received gifts and other acts of kindness, their mood went up. Those who gave gifts, they had the biggest mood boost of all.
Mhm.
So we've heard it's better to give than to receive. The science has backed it up. It is literally better for the giver to be kind and generous. And both work, by the way, being
Yep.
kind and generous, which is a form of kindness. They both work to boost mood for everyone involved. And again, through the contagiousness effect, we help others, we inspire others to be kind.
Mhm.
But the beautiful thing is, nice people win, right? It's the kind people that get the biggest boost
Yes.
in mood. And as a result, happier brains generally do better work. So
Mhm.
those who are kind to others enjoy the improved brain function that comes with the good mood from being kind.
Mhm. Yeah, I've also heard that when you are sad or depressed or just even having a bad day, the best way to get out is to go do something kind for someone else. And that kind of goes in what
Absolutely.
you were just saying, because then you go out of your own bubble and then you feel good because you just made someone else feel good, whether this is with strangers or with someone that you know, whether it's a free text message. Or I was in a assisted living the other day and bought Starbucks cards on the 4th of July and gave them to all the people and just said their faces were like, oh my gosh, because no one's thanked them first for working on a holiday. But it's just, I was like, I felt so energized to do that when
Yeah.
a stressful situation, is happening with a family member. So it
Yes.
really does. So, and I love that you're talking about what it does to our brain, because that's the reason why, to motivate people who are like, well, I don't know if, kindness is real. It's like, no, it really is real because Scott said so.
It makes a real difference. And I love the example you gave of somebody feeling down. Again, with the qualifier that I'm nobody's mental health professional,
Mhm.
most of what the science of happiness suggests will help people who are depressed. Thinking of 3 things you're grateful for is something that works really well for most of us. It backfires on people who are depressed.
Mm.
If you ask someone who's depressed to think of 3 things they're grateful for, they struggle to think of anything because they're depressed, and then they feel even worse, right?
Mm.
Again, I'm not an expert on depression, but part of depression is a self focus. We get wrapped up in our own thoughts too much, too negatively. What you're suggesting is if you're feeling down, don't think about yourself. Don't even try to go to gratitude. Think about somebody else and what you can do for them.
Yep.
And it's just so uplifting for all of us to think about other people, to do something
Mhm.
kind for other people. If you sadly look at the journals of people who commit suicide, they are filled with I, me, mine, and self-focused thoughts,
Mhm.
much more so than people who don't end up committing suicide.
Mhm.
So I don't mean to go so dark on you
Mhm.
in a chat
Oh,
about happiness and kindness, but as you said, the world needs this right now, right? I mean,
Mhm.
to be blunt about this, you and I have had it easy during the past couple of rough years, right?
Mm.
We were able to present virtually to our clients. We both love doing highly interactive Zoom sessions that keep
Mm.
people engaged, even if they're scattered all over. Great, you and I are fine. A lot
Mhm.
of people are not fine.
Mhm.
And you and I are relatively fine. I would say, I
Mhm.
don't need to speak for you, but it's been a hard few years for me, and I've had it easier than a lot of people.
Yep.
We need this from each other. People are hurting, people
Mhm.
are wounded, people are sad, people need our kindness. And it can be hard to want to come up with it. It can be hard to want to initiate it if you're having a hard time.
Mhm.
But as you're saying, that's when we need it the most.
Mhm.
It's like when you're really struggling, give,
Mhm.
listen, smile,
Mhm.
hold a door. It doesn't have to be I'm giving one of my kidneys to a stranger, right?
Right.
It can be I'm waving and letting this person into traffic, or I'm staying an extra 30 seconds and listening to this person I'm talking to.
Oh my gosh, yes, for sure. Now, you mentioned your game that you play with your clients. And I know also
Yes.
like when we can play, we can find things that we enjoy, whether you and I both love playing in nature, you love music, I love karaoke, but I can't play guitar. But so with your game, I do want to talk about your game because also it's something that people can do with teams. So it's like to figure out how you can bring some more energy, to your teams right now, even if you're in a virtual space. So will you tell us a little bit about your game?
Absolutely. So the game is called Choose Happiness at Work.
Mm,
And for those listening and not watching, it's a card game, somewhat like Apples to Apples, or dare I bring up Cards Against Humanity.
yeah.
My friend says that my game should be called Cards for Humanity.
Uh,
Why? Because it has a similar play mechanic. There are some rule differences and all of the content is different.
mhm,
But basically, there are over 50 human-related problems in the deck. So random
mm,
ones I have at the top here are: people rarely show appreciation for my work well done.
mm.
I must work very long hours, and those around me tolerate mediocre and even low quality work from each other. So those are the problems that we,
Mm,
oh, I'm so sorry for this noise.
no problem.
You being a kind person and your listeners being kind will forgive me for failing to put my devices in airplane mode before we did this. And then there's over 100 science-based solutions, each of which is something we can do to boost mood depending on the situation. So remind yourself why, take a day off. Yup, science
Mm,
behind it.
yep.
Mindfulness, smile, stomp the stairs. And one of these cards says, be a sweetheart, which is about kindness. Another says, ask a favor, do a favor. When we do things for each other, it boosts our kindness.
I love
So this game is intended to get people together and get them learning about each other and the science of happiness at the same
that.
time. And points are awarded for best solution and most creative or most humorous solution. So the card game is a way to get a group of colleagues together and do something fun, right?
I love that.
It's easy to be kind when it's just a game, right? It can be a little harder to be kind if you're competing with a colleague for limited resources and funding in next year's budget, but it's easy to be kind if it's just a game, right? So
Mhm,
games provide a way for us to play together and build relationships and be kind, all of which ultimately helps success and productivity.
for
I
sure.
will also quickly mention that I'm working on a video game version of that game. And if any of your listeners would like to play test that,
Yeah.
depending on when this comes out, not guaranteeing anything, but contact me through my site, happybrainscience.com, if you want to pull a group of 4 to 8 people together and play the video game version with me. I am welcoming some playtest and some feedback before I finish up and ship it.
Ooh, I love it. Okay, good. So that's a fabulous offer for the listeners that you could be a part of this video game. And then Scott, if you could tell the listeners just to do one thing in the next 30 days, what would you tell them to do to really boost their happiness as it relates to kindness? What would you tell them to do?
I would tell them to act like an extrovert. Now, I know that for introverts, that might land badly. You might be thinking, if you're an introvert, oh, sure, Crabtree, you're clearly extroverted. You're all animated talking with Allison. I'm sure you're an extrovert. And yes, I am more extroverted than introverted, although I think all of us have a bit of both. But as always, I'm trying to give you as little of my opinion as possible and as much grounded on science as possible.
Mm.
So I had the great pleasure of having dinner with Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky at a happiness conference a few years back. And another professor at the table said, Sonia, what's the most exciting research you haven't published yet? And she said, we are seeing the biggest boost in well-being we've found in any study when we basically tell people to act like an extrovert. Now, they don't use those words.
Mhm.
They say, be outgoing, initiate
Mm.
conversation with strangers, etc. But to me, this is a form of kindness, and it's one that we need desperately in our society right now. We are divided. We spend time on social media and hurl insults at each other we would never do in the real world,
Mhm.
right? The data suggests that we anticipate conversations with strangers are going to be awkward,
Hmm.
they're going to be difficult, that stranger's not going to be interested in us, and it's going to be a bummer for us. And the data shows that when we actually talk with strangers, we enjoy the conversation
Mhm.
almost always. It is
Mhm.
almost always an uplift.
Mhm.
So look, kindness, it's wonderful when you buy someone a spreader that says spread happy on it or something like that. But kindness comes in a lot of forms. And for many of us, it's just saying hello to somebody. It's talking to the person in the store.
Mhm. Or just
It's
making eye contact,
yeah,
right?
eye
Yes.
contact is a great place to start.
Yep.
I read an interview with a scientist who studies happiness, and they asked a question a lot like what you asked me. If you could just give one piece of advice, what would it be? And the person said, treat every elevator ride as a wonderful opportunity for a brief social interaction.
Ooh, I
And
love that.
I knew that, and I still get on an elevator and I go, this person probably doesn't want to talk to me. They're probably tired. They probably don't. And then I'm like, no, come on, Scott, remember the
You're like, just
studies.
say one thing,
And
right?
I just say, hi, how's it going? And almost every single time, friendly conversation results, and I step off that elevator happier than I stepped onto it. So it's the moment to moment interactions. Another
Mhm.
researcher named Barbara Fredrickson has a book called Love 2.0, where she says, love is this moment to moment interaction, and it can happen between people who don't know each other or just met.
Mhm.
I don't want to get into the subtleties of defining love and
Sounds
all of that,
fun.
but she's saying it's the moment to moment presence with other people. It's the connection with other people that matters. So I would say foster that connection, even if
Mhm.
you feel shy or introverted about it. The data suggests extroverts and introverts get a massive boost in well-being from
I
kind
just,
interactions with other people.
I love that. Well, it's interesting. So I have a kind scorecard that I use in my sessions, and
Yeah.
there's 10 different ways we rate ourselves. Number one is self, which you and I already talked about. But the last one is strangers. And I would say 9 out of 10 times people rate that the lowest area. And I always ask them, I say, why? And they're like, well, I'm never going to see that person again. But I said, but has a stranger ever made your day? And most people will say yes. So it's just, and I love what you just said about, once you start having conversations, they're fun and you learn something. And this is even, I was in a Lyft ride the other day to the airport. And Lyft and your servers, like just asking people questions. This Lyft driver was a cheesemaker. I did not know, like I learned all about this
Nice.
cheese. Like people are fascinating. So if you just put your phone down and engage
Yes.
in your Uber or your Lyft or whatever transportation you're taking, or ask the server, like, hey, where are you originally from? Like just having these moments, because we have no idea what people are going through. And
Yes.
people are more fascinating than anything that you're going to find on your phone. So I
Yes.
love that advice. And then Scott, one more time, how can people find you if they would like to learn more information, get your video game trial, and or hire you to help their company?
Thank you so much. The best place to find out more and reach me is my website, happybrainscience.com.
Okay.
I so appreciate your kindness having me on, Allison. And one final note, there's a study that if you count the kind acts you do towards others, it seems to boost you even more. So I love your happiness scorecard. We should all keep a little happiness scorecard. Just noticing the ways we're kind to each other can give us even more of a boost. And
Oh
who
my
couldn't use a
gosh.
boost at times like this?
Exactly. Yes. Well, thank you so much. I did wear my shirt. Do the kind thing. All of
You do
us
it.
do the kind thing, have conversations, make eye contact, and remember how much your happiness is going to be boosted by the more kindness you show in this world. So thank you, Scott. It was lovely to see you. Enjoy Sisters, Oregon, and all the nature there and the sunshine.
Thank you so much, Allison.
Yes.